From the STMM Digital Studio, welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show, the show that celebrates the people who are working so hard to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Incidentally, the STMM Digital is the advertising and marketing arm of SuperTalk Mississippi Media. It's a best-in-class digital effort serving clients across the state of Mississippi. And so when it comes to your digital solutions, you need to reach out to STMM Digital. They are world-class, and they'll help take your digital efforts to the next level. If you're a business owner, you have responsibilities for digital advertising company, and you're frustrated with your current digital efforts, you need to reach out to STMM Digital. As a former digital media CEO, I can tell you without a doubt that this team is incredible. So now let's shift gears and move over to my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Wow, Jeff, not only is it hot, which you wrote about, and we'll come back to in just a second, it's been just an absolutely interesting camp, hasn't it, buddy?
Yeah, lots of news, lots of stuff breaking. It's funny how camp starts, Ricky, because the off season's such a kind of a drought and dead zone for news, and then all of a sudden camp starts, and it's like you go from 0 to 80 almost overnight, and every day it seems like something's breaking here. So that's fun. That's what we're in the business for. It is.
And listen, man, you guys, you and your team have done a great job. And for people who have not signed up for the NOLA.com Times-Picayune Saints newsletter, you ought to, because they continue to make adjustments to it, they're making it better. They're helping to sort of lead you into the other stuff that they're doing sort of across the spectrum as it relates to Saints coverage. And I mean, it's just really good. By the way, you wrote today's, and you guys rotate that, but the improvements are terrific, aren't they, buddy?
Yeah, look, we're trying to grow that audience and trying to make it a little more engaging for the readers. We're putting in Saints trivia questions and polls, just some fun things to make it kind of a great way to start your day. If you're a big Saints fan and you want to start each morning, it's going to come right to your inbox. You can get all of our coverage, but also just get a little lanyap, try to give you a little insight into what's going on with the team. Just make it a little something special, almost like you're a part of a club, and getting some insider knowledge along with our daily coverage from our great team.
I like the way that you're engaging readers around polls, and that's going to be interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what first one we debuted this week, and we'll have more. I know we've got one coming up, basically asking you how you think the Saints are going to do it. I got to tell you, Ricky, this team. I'm doing my annual media poll, very similar, question, getting a record pick for every local media member on the Saints. And I think we're going to have a wide range on this team. It'll be interesting to see what our readers and our newsletter subscribers think, because I've just in anecdotal conversations with some media members, I've seen a wide array of responses to how this team is going to be. I think it shows you how mysterious this 2023 team is.
There's a lot of mystery. One of the things you guys have done a good job at is talking about players that are game ready, that are playing at that high level. Now, when you go into training camp and you watch players go out and run routes, and you watch quarterbacks throw, and you watch people tackle, and you watch linemen do what they do. In an isolated way, you can get too excited about certain players. But the reality is that when they're playing at that highest level, I mean, when they're ready for NFL games, when their steps a little bit, faster, when they're a little bit more focused, when they have their mental game together, it stands out. And I think one that you might want to contrast is sort of where Michael Thomas is in the game and what you guys have observed more recently in Jimmy Graham.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just kind of pontificate a little bit on this whole situation. I mean, a good example was yesterday. Brian Brzee, the first-round draft pick from Clemson, defensive tackle, had a great practice. Was blowing into the backfield, knifing in penetration, but he was going most of the time against Alex Filstrom, the third-string center. It wasn't doing this against Eric McCoy, so you have to take all that into context. Yes, it's good that he's doing it, but who's he doing it against? So I think that's something you always have to take into account when you're reading these breathless reports from practice, I really have to take into context who it's going against. And that's why I really believe we'll get a better gauge after Sunday, where the Saints play a preseason game against the Chiefs, and then next week and the week after when they have joint practices with the Texans and the Chargers next week.
Yeah.
Because then you see ones-on-ones, good on good. It's not this, because of injuries, there's just a lot of missing people right now in the Saints practices. Having said that, I have a story coming up on NOLA.com. Let me give a plug. You'll probably be able to find it if you hear this. The 10 players that have stood out to me so far in camp, the 10 players who in conversations with Saints coaches, players, and staff members have stood out and tried to wait a couple of weeks to give a body of work for players. I remind people all the time of Marcus Colston. His first year with the Saints in 2006, his first 10 days of camp were terrible. I mean, the Saints coaches thought they were going to cut him. He was so bad. And then all of a sudden the light bulb came on midway through camp, and he ends up starting and going on to be the leading receiver in the history of the franchise. So there's a benefit to giving some time before you make these sweeping evaluations or generalizations about players. And right now, Michael, you mentioned Michael Thomas, and Michael Thomas is working his way back. He's not the guy he was 3 or 4 years ago, and he shouldn't be expected to be that guy. I mean, he's coming off basically 3 years of being sidelined by injuries, different surgeries he's had. Every time somebody, as you know, Ricky, I mean, anytime you get cut open, you're not the same. I mean, it's very difficult to come back. So he's working his way back. Where does he end up? I don't know. I mean, the guy works incredibly hard. But right now, I think expectations that Michael Thomas is going to step on the field and be the number one receiver for the Saints are really, I think, fool's gold. I think right now the number one receiver on this team clearly is Chris Olave, and Michael Thomas is going to be something of a role player, but a very critical role for this team. But he's not what he was 3 or 4 years ago. And
Jimmy Graham, the evolution of Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, look, he looks surprisingly good for a player that didn't play football last year and has played as many downs as he has. Now, I think the key for guys like Jimmy Graham are not what they look like right now. It's going to be what they look like 2 or 3 weeks into the season when they start getting beat up. That's always the concern when you bring in veteran players in their 30s, is how do they recover from the violent nature of this game? And I think that's going to be something we have to watch with Jimmy Graham. Right now, he looks tremendous. He's lighter. I think that was definitely something he needed to do coming in. I bet he's around 260. I think he told us he was around 280 in his final years with the Bears and the Packers. So let's see how he goes. But, I would temper expectations just because of that. But he looks good right now. I have to say that.
Well, listen, I know you're writing about it, and we can go to NOLA.com and read more about the players that you think stood out and the players that you think are struggling. And so I don't want to let too much of the cat out of the bag. But on the list of players that you think are standing out, I bet Granderson is on that list.
Yep, number 2. So good call. I mean, number 1, I mentioned already, Chris Olave. I think he's been the best player on the field on offense, and I think Carl Granderson's been the best player on the field on defense. Now, that's another example, though, of what we really have to see how he does when he lines up against the Chiefs and the Chargers, because right now he's been going a lot against Trevor Penning, and frankly, he's wearing Trevor Penning out in pass protection. But where Carl Granderson's made his biggest leap is as a run defender. It's something when he came in the league, I think he weighed around 260, and through hard work and effort and just, evolution, he's up to about 280 now. He's much stronger at the point of attack against the run, but he's also maintained that agility and quickness off the edge. And I can see why the Saints were willing to let Marcus Davenport go in free agency, because I think they felt so good about Carl Granderson. And there was a time when they talked about him and Peyton Turner competing for that spot opposite Cam Jordan. There's no competition. I mean, it's going to be Carl Granderson's job. And that's because he's won it. It's really nothing Peyton Turner's done poorly. Carl Granderson's just been that good.
Hey, you can always expect the Saints to do transactions this time of year. that's always goes with the territory as they get injuries and other challenges, happen. I've been following you on Twitter, and it was reported nationally that we were about to sign 2 guys, but some people really jumped the gun on that. Talk about what that's all about and what's the latest.
Yeah, look, Diana Rossini reported that, and I know we'll probably come back after the break.
Jeff, I didn't realize we were at the end of this break. I didn't want to have to cut you off. So why don't we do this? Right on the other side, we'll talk about player transactions and national news around that. I want to talk about Jameis Winston. Kind of feel like there's a little bit of a dud there, and the emergence of Haener as a absolutely incredible young talent. So we'll see what Jeff has to say about that when we come back with Jeff Duncan on the other side from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. We'll see you after this. From the STMM Digital Studio, I'm so happy to be back on the Ricky Mathews Show with my friend Jeff Duncan. When we went to break, we were talking about some national news about signing players that we ultimately didn't sign, and Jeff's been watching that very closely. We made some other transactions, but what's the latest on all that, Jeff?
Well, the Saints brought in a couple of veteran players, kind of high-profile names, former Pro Bowlers, each guy, Kareem Hunt, the running back, and Anthony Barr, the linebacker. And look, reports looked like they were going to sign him, and those reports were probably accurate. But it's a fluid situation, so I don't really cast any negative light on the reports. I think both situations were different. Kareem Hunt, you have to remember, Ricky, sometimes these agents like to get the news out that their players or clients are visiting teams. That way it creates interest in their players. And that's exactly what happened in both these cases. Both players ended up getting more visits, and that caused a domino effect with whether they would sign here or not. I still think there's a possibility they could sign with the Saints at some point, but usually the Saints bring those guys in. They like to sign them right then. And if they don't sign them right away, I would think maybe it's something they wait till after the season opener. When you sign a veteran player, just for the readers and the listeners and viewers to know, they're guaranteed. If you sign them before the season starts, their contracts are guaranteed for the rest of the year. So if you wait until after the season opener, sign them the day after, then you can cut them a week or two into camp, and you just owe them for what they played. So a lot of times you'll see these veterans sign after the season opener. That wouldn't surprise me in either case here. But Anthony Barr, the linebacker, they're looking at him because they really need some veteran experience behind starters Pete Werner and Demario Davis. They don't have a lot of experience now that Andrew Dowell suffered a season-ending ACL injury. So I think they'll continue to look for veteran help at linebacker. But these are depth transactions. Kareem Hunt was a Pro Bowl player back in the day. He's not that guy anymore. I mean, that's why he's still on the street. And it's hard to get a guy to come in when you've already got Jamal Williams, a rookie like in Kendre Miller, and Alvin Kamara is going to come back in week 4. If you're Kareem Hunt, that's not a very appetizing situation to come into. So I think there's a lot of reasons why that didn't work out.
It's interesting watching the quarterback play. We're all excited about a starting quarterback. And is it because you got a really viable, smart quarterback in here that the gap between him and Jameis Winston seems bigger? Or is this Jameis Winston just not playing up to his standard?
I just think he's had a slow start to camp for whatever reason. I think some of that could be attributed to the fact that the Saints have had a lot of injuries along the offensive line, guys missing. We haven't seen Andres Pete out there. Ryan Ramczak's had a lot of veteran days off. They've been shuffling in guys on the left side. Trevor Penning's still a work in progress. So you get down, Jameis Winston's playing with a lot of second and third teamers and going against the Saints defensive line, which is very deep. When you get into their second team, there's still almost starting quality players there. It shows. And so not to make excuses for him, but I do think that is a factor. But he just hasn't had a great start to camp. But I wouldn't panic. Jameis Winston's got skins on the wall in this league, and, he's going to be the backup quarterback. They're not going to Jake Haener, a fourth-round pick that's never played before, not Dennis Allen. So it's going to be Jameis, and then Haener is the third stringer. And look, the best thing I would say for Saints fans is Derek Carr, I think, has missed less than a handful of games in his entire career. It's been very durable. So, I wouldn't expect to even have to worry about Jameis Winston getting in there if things go as planned.
I posted a picture of Derek Carr yesterday on my personal Facebook page. He was dropping back for a pass and about to throw it. And, when you see him, like when he's just talking, he doesn't look that sort of beefed up kind of guy and whatever. But this particular picture, man, he was in really good shape. This guy has really done well at taking care of himself, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's 10 years. This is his 10th year in the league, man. He looks in great shape. After practice yesterday, we spent a lot of time with Matt Ray, the Saints sports science director, doing a lot of core work and calisthenics on the field after practice, understanding that, it's a long season, a grind, and, you got to stay ahead of the game in that regard. And I think they've got like the complete package in Derek Carr as far as understanding what it takes to be a franchise quarterback. He's looked really good in the 2-minute offense, which is a critical part of the game. It's where Drew Brees excelled. So many games are won and lost in your ability to execute there. And the Saints, frankly, were not very good at it the last couple of years. So I think that's an area where Saints fans should be encouraged. I think in a lot of ways, Derek Carr is just going to calm things down at the quarterback position. I want to temper expectations a little bit because I think people are getting on the hype train, which is what happens this time of year. But I think he's going to manage the game, and you just got some stability at that position that we haven't seen there the last couple of years. And I think in a division that's ripe for the taking for the Saints, a veteran team like that, that's all they really are asking to that position.
Hey, not to bounce around too much, but coming back to the docuseries that you recommended that we talked about last week, Quarterbacks, where Patrick Mahomes was one of the quarterbacks that was featured. And I told you I was blown away with how the kind of gym that was set up and the kind of work he did to stay in shape during the season. It was extraordinary. I never imagined that quarterbacks would go through that amount of physical activity during the season. But in a recent story I read about Marshawn Lattimore, man, that guy seems locked in, and he's coming in early and leaving late and doing the kind of things that I guess that he's doing the kind of things that I saw on that quarterback series that Mahomes is doing. But Marshawn he's got the eye of the tiger this year, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's had a really good camp. He's also on my list of players that have shined, and that should be expected. I mean, he's a multi-Pro Bowler, but I think he's motivated after coming off that kind of fluke injury he had last year, where he had the core injury that kept him out of a lot of games, and when he came back, he was very inconsistent. And I think that's always been the key with Lattimore. I mean, can he play 17 games at the same level? He's always risen to the occasion when he goes against the Mike Evans of the world and the Julio Joneses. He seems to get up for those matchups, and then he'll have some bouts of inconsistency or lack of focus. And I think they need him to be that shutdown corner in every game this year, and it looks so far like he's rising to that challenge.
Yeah, it's interesting watching a press conference with Dennis Allen, who's the play caller for defense. And with Marshawn playing at that high level, it really opens up possibilities for him. And I noticed that with free safety, they've been moving around and doing unique things during practice. But he's got a lot of pieces to work with, doesn't he?
Yeah, look, I talked to him after practice yesterday off to the side, and he's really high on their secondary. I mean, that's the strength of the defense. They're very deep there. I mean, they've got guys like, people aren't familiar with guys like Ike Yadam. He's like the number 4 cornerback on this team, but they're very high on him. They would not hesitate to have him start a game. He's looked very good in practice. He's matched up very well with Mike Thomas, many times winning those battles. So I think that's a strength right now, this team in their secondary. They're going to use those chess pieces. That's what Dennis Allen's strength is as a coordinator, keeping offenses guessing. And when you have shutdown guys like Marshawn Lattimore, it gives you a lot of flexibility because you have the trust that he's going to have his guy covered if they come after the quarterback.
A lot of Saints fans don't know the name Smoke Monday. I watched him carefully in his college career. He's an extraordinarily talented young man. Unfortunately, got injured, and we haven't seen him. But what's your read on Smoke Monday?
Well, I think he's got some competition to make the roster. I think it's going to be important for him to play well in these preseason games and these joint practices. Because right now he hasn't done it on film. He hasn't played in a game. He got injured last year in camp, missed all of his rookie season. He's an undrafted free agent, and they've got a lot of veteran guys at that position competing with him. Lonnie Johnson Jr., Jonathan Abrams from Mississippi State, guys, a former first-round draft pick. So there's a lot of guys that have done it in the league, whereas Smoke Monday hasn't. And when you have a veteran coach, a guy like Dennis Allen, he prefers, most coaches do, they prefer guys that they have seen do it on film. So I think Smoke Monday, he could make the roster if he plays well these next few weeks, the active roster, but I don't think there's any doubt he's going to be on the practice squad. There's no doubt they're very high on him, and he's had some flashes during camp. There's no doubt.
Hey, listen, I wasn't surprised you wrote the column about the Heat, but Jeff wrote a column, essentially said this needs to be the last training camp in New Orleans. It's affecting the team, and some of the best teams in the league don't practice at home, and they're winners. Good column, Jeff.
Yeah, we'll see. Look, they're going to probably take camp on the road next year for sure, because they have construction on campus that's going to force them to go away. They're not going to have a cafeteria or an indoor facility, and we'll see if they make that a permanent move or not. There's a lot of political pressure on them to be home with the fans, use the indoor facility, which they got state money for. But it's a sensitive subject right now, and it's a long way off. But I expect them for sure to be on the road next year.
For sure. Hey, Jeff, as we get closer to the start of the season, these conversations get even better. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. We'll talk next week, buddy.
You bet. Hey, when we come back, we're going to talk a little about SuperTalk Mississippi news. We'll see you after this.